I started moving into the insects and other alternative proteins, like you said, like the chia seeds, hemp, and also canary seeds. So for those ones, and particularly the chia seeds and the canary seeds, we actually were able to identify the specific protein fragments or peptides sequences that had some health benefits that go beyond basic nutrition, like anti-aging, anti-inflammatory, anti-hypertensive, anti-diabetic, etc., etc. So in those cases, the technologies that we used in the lab to separate the protein from the chia seeds and the canary seeds respectively, and the analysis we did to identify the sequences, the actual sequences of those amino acids that make up that specific protein, etc., etc., we were able to patent that. So at this point, that's when the university is encouraging us, okay, if you have something, a new discovery that's patented, especially recently, one of the biggest gridlocks I have found is with regards to the research related to insects. When I started this, focusing on insect protein and researching insects as a protein source, that was about almost 10 years ago. The pushback from my peers, from funding agencies, right, to fund the research, regulations, so federal government regulations that didn't think that insects should be eaten.
Andrea Liceaga is a food scientist at heart, with over a decade of pioneering research into alternative proteins, from chia seeds and canary seeds to insects and invasive fish. Andrea have explored the frontiers of sustainable nutrition. A groundbreaking study on invasive fish and protein hydrolysis got a lot of media attention, while work on the bioactive peptides in chia seeds and canary seeds revealed their potential for health and weight management. Andrea delved deep into consumer acceptance of insects, uncovering ways to make these unconventional ingredients not just edible but also enjoyable. Andrea brings a lot of insights in overcoming challenges in research and innovation, lessons that resonate far beyond the world of food science. This is Tomorrow's Bites, and now, dear impact makers, here's our conversation with Andrea Liceaga.
Well, Andrea, thanks a lot for joining to the podcast with us. We got to meet each other in the Future of Protein Production here in Amsterdam. It was really nice, the talk we had. I wish we already had all the equipment there to just record a talk, because that was already podcast worthy. And that is when I was like, yeah, we need to invite her as well, because we need to repeat this.
Oh.
So I think that we always do a similar question to our guests when it comes to the first one. That is basically, why do you do what you do? What is the mission you're behind?
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, both of you. It was really nice also meeting you in Amsterdam and chatting up with you. And it's too bad we didn't record that conversation. It was so good. And especially because I don't know if we had drinks next to us, but that also helped. Right now I only have caffeine. But what makes me do what I do is that I always wanted to find a purpose for what my career goal was going to be. How could I help or contribute in some way to society? Some of the issues that current society is facing. And as a food scientist, I think my main goal is to find ways to discover or explore and exploit new protein sources, alternative protein sources that will help us feed the world in the next 25, 50 years.
You know, it's interesting. I want to ask you, how does that for you a perfect world looks like?
What is a perfect world? Wow. Okay. This is very philosophical. I think a perfect world would be where everyone has access to our basic and main rights and requirements, like having access to food, shelter, healthcare. Those three main things equally. Education and education as well. So I think that's not something that we should be fighting for or struggling to get. It's a mandatory right that we all should have equally.
I wanted to dig in the beginning of everything. Like, where does the journey start? How do you become interested in food science in the first place?
Many years ago, back in the 90s, I don't think you were even born.
Depend on when in the 90s.
It was fun. Not as much fun as the 80s, but that's all right. I was reading, like, when I was in high school, finishing high school, it was all this trend about cholesterol-free or no cholesterol foods started to come out because of the studies that were showing that cholesterol caused cardiovascular disease or heart problems. And so all the, if you went to the grocery store, this wasn't back in Mexico, I remember, you would see all this like cholesterol-free, no cholesterol, but, and anything going from bread to cooking oil to candy. And I used to say, well, what, like, why cholesterol? Why is this big fuss about cholesterol? And why all these foods have no cholesterol? So between what I was learning in high school, your basic classes, but also intrigued, realized that, they were selling the water is wet claim kind of thing, that telling me, well, obviously if it's a vegetable oil, it's most likely not going to have cholesterol because it's not an animal fat. Now I know that. But anyway, so that triggered me to want to study food science and learn how food was made and why were they making this type of claim.
There was any pivotal moment you remember in the journey that took you to specialize in the part of alternative protein?
Yeah, I think when I was in, I guess in college, like doing my bachelor's degree in biochemical engineering, we were actually taught, which was with a major in food science and technology. They taught us, and this was in Mexico. One of the classes we took was how to utilize the fishing industry bycatch. So the university was located in the coast of in the Sea of Cortez, and so we had a lot of fishing activity. It's a fishing port, very well-known fishing port, and all the shrimp trawlers, as they would sweep the floor to get the shrimp, well, so they swept everything else too. So a lot of bycatch, and that was really not utilized. It was just dumped back into the ocean, but useless. Like it's all the marine life is dead already by the time they troll it out. So it's a lot. It's very depressing actually.
Yes.
So in our university, we were taught, okay, this is food that is getting wasted. What can we do with it? So anything from the smallest fish to anything else that was caught in these nets, giant trawlers, what can be saved to either make animal feed, fertilizer, or actual human food products. So we were taught to make anything from like, well, let's formulate hamburger patties, sausages, pates, or, things with all these marine byproducts that otherwise would not be consumed. So that sort of started putting that little seed in my brain saying, okay, let's use the unusable, or let's find ways to minimize waste in our food production systems.
This was during your bachelor's, you said?
Yes, that's when it started. So then when I went to do my master's degree in Vancouver at UBC, I worked primarily in food microbiology, so it wasn't really not directly related to any byproducts or anything. But as I was doing that, we had again, Vancouver is also, right, a coastal city. We had an issue with one of a fishing company that had caught all this herring because of the herring industry, where they basically process the herring roe, and then all the spent herring or the male herring get wasted, thrown out, discarded, because that's not what they wanted. They just wanted the roe. So we had all this massive amounts of herring that they were going to throw away, and they came to the university, to the food science department where I was doing my master's, and said, what can we do with this? So I was the only one that had some fish experience because of my bachelor's working in Mexico in that university with all this fish bycatch. So my professor back then, he said, well, you want to do something with this herring, because otherwise we're just going to have to throw it away. But I'm talking about, I don't know, maybe it was like 50 kilograms of herring. It was quite a bit. So I started doing some reading. Everything was like refrigerated. I had time frame before it starts spoiling, and I started processing it, making adding enzymes to batches of herring and trying to make protein hydrolysate, so extracting the protein and using that protein for food formulations, like studying it for its applications. And that's when, again, that seed came back of saying, okay, this is something so we that was my first publication as a scientist in 1999. So, so from there on, it's always been, moving on to my PhD, then I started to work more into that area and left the microbiology to the side.
Yeah, because what you're currently doing is not, it is part still on the science part, but now you're actually on the, let's say unconventional protein sources, right? Like insects, but also chia seeds and hemp, as we have seen in your research. So how did that switch made?
So when I came to Purdue, well, it was my first time in a university or in a place where there is no ocean next to it. We're in the Midwest, and we have the Wabash River, and that's about it. So I thought, okay, well, what can I do in this now that I'm here? Like, how am I going to apply all my research with fish and byproducts? But soon I realized that, number one, there was an invasive fish that is prevalent in the Midwest. I don't know if I talked about that with you when we met in Amsterdam, but it's generally broadly called the Asian carp, but it's actually two species. It's the silver carp and bighead carp, which are invasive fish. They were brought up from China back in the 1950s to the U.S. to clean fish farms, to clean the tanks. And then they don't
is
know
that those ones that suck on the...
Yes, but they're not even bottom feeders, but they are very good to clean for cleaning.
Yeah.
So in Asian countries, this type of fish, the big head carp and silver carp, are a delicacy, and they're farmed and they're widely consumed. But here in North America, it's not an acceptable fish because it has a lot of intramuscular bones, and just people associate the carps with bottom feeders because of that cleaning. So it's not like here, it's a nuisance. And unfortunately for us, the fish has become an invasive species in the Mississippi River system. So it's that whole river system that runs from Mississippi all the way up to the Great Lakes, bordering with Canada. The Asian carp, particularly silver carp, have completely have invaded about in some places up to 80%, have taken over about 80% of the Mississippi. So it's becoming really, the DNA has already been found on the Great Lakes. So can you imagine? They're very aggressive competitors, so they will eat everything else, outcompete with the native species. So here in the U.S., that's been a big challenge since I came here 15 years ago, on ways to try and exterminate completely that fish. They even pay hunters to go in the water and shoot them and hunt them. But there's videos you can check later on the internet, like on YouTube or whatever. Check videos of just type invasive silver Asian carp in the U.S. and you will see videos of people like how they're jumping off the water and even hitting boaters because they're huge fish. Anyway, so I thought, okay, well, this is perfect. This fish we can use. So I have a colleague in the Department of Forestry here at Purdue that works with the invasive fish, and he goes and tags and monitors and quantifies, and is trying, again, to control them genetically with electronic barriers and doing all this stuff. So I said, just start, like, whatever jumps into your boat, bring it over, and I'll use it. So he would come with giant garbage bags, like huge. They look like body bags filled with fish still flapping inside. And bring them to my lab, and then we would obviously use them and make protein hydrolysates from them, so protein powders, and then use all that protein to formulate. We made tortillas, we made chorizo, sausages, and all this. So we were like on TV and newspapers in the local newspaper with interviews about, if you can't beat them, let's eat them. That was the slogan.
Good. It rhymes. Yeah. That is the important part.
Yes, and actually they tasted really good. People were asking, like, where do you sell this chorizo? And
it's a fish chorizo.
It was promising. Fish chorizo, so healthy.
Yeah.
That is a question I wanted to do. When you develop these kind of things in the university, is with the purpose of mere research, or then you partner these things with companies in order to offer them like this, hey, you can do this thing, or
Yeah. So yeah, my primary interest is research focused,
of course.
and it's not to obviously definitely not to become rich, or I wouldn't be here, right? But I'm a scientist at heart, and I like doing research on things that I'm passionate about. Um, and so we published. So I published the paper about the chorizo, published the paper about the hydrolysate, fish protein hydrolysates from the silver carp, etc., etc. But for example, for more other, moving on to other protein sources after the fish, I started moving into the insects and other alternative proteins, like you said, like the chia seeds, hemp, and also canary seeds. So for those ones, in particularly the chia seeds and the canary seeds, we actually were able to identify the specific protein fragments or peptides sequences that had some health benefits that go beyond basic nutrition, like anti-aging, anti-inflammatory, anti-hypertensive, anti-diabetic, etc., etc. So in those cases, the technologies that we used in the lab to separate the protein from the chia seeds and the canary seeds respectively, and the analysis we did to identify the sequences, the actual sequences of those amino acids that make up that specific protein, etc., etc., we were able to patent that. So at this point, that's when the university is encouraging us, okay, if you have something, a new discovery that's patented, let's have an application, and then they are in charge of commercializing those patents.
Yeah. So I have a question. How did you decide to go onto these, like say, hennep and chia seeds?
Well, I guess the main ones that I did work a little bit with hemp, but in the last few years, the focus has been primarily in the chia seeds and canary seeds. And the reason I work with those two crops are because they're widely consumed in Mexico, where I'm originally from, as you remember, as we've been talking.
Yeah.
And they're actually used because of their high nutritional quality.
Yeah.
For example, chia seeds are pre-Hispanic crop. So it's been widely used in Mesoamerica. Like the Aztecs would consume it because of the high protein content, and to this day, people still eat and drink chia seeds, especially like in lemonade. They would add chia seeds, and then it enhances the protein. And like you have now protein in your lemonade. So I wanted to study it and see. Okay, say these are emerging crops. They're not very popular here, or they're getting not as well known. What are the benefits of the like the folk culture or popular culture in Mexico will say that they would have also been medicinal effects, but nothing was, back then it wasn't really scientifically proven. There were a few studies here and there, but very broad. So I wanted to, deep dive into that and find out maybe what was causing that health effect associated with it.
So what were the biggest discoveries so far on these?
So with the chia seeds, for us we noticed that yes, they did have like anti-hypertensive activity, so they could help lower if you do it in an in vivo. Obviously, we haven't done it with humans, but in our preliminary lab trials, we have found that they could help or contribute to prevent the onset of high blood pressure. We also did an interesting, part of the patent we have is the technology we use to separate the protein from the rest of the seed in chias. The seed has a carbohydrate that's very viscous. That's called mucilage. So I don't know if you've ever had chia seeds. You put them in water or anything and they swell up. Well, that swelling up, that's the mucilage. And that mucilage is really hard for us to digest because it's a very dense polysaccharide.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was affecting the protein. So it's very hard sometimes to digest if you don't have good enzymes in there.
I thought that they said like you should have soak it in water before consuming it to get the most out of it, right?
Yes, you're right, because then that swells
Yeah,
up,
exactly.
and it might be a little bit easier for your body to break them down.
Yeah.
But a lot of people just eat them, like add them into their yogurt and eat them as is, and then they have all this back up in their GI tract because all the seeds start piling up in their colon. But by separating the mucilage, we were able to enhance the protein extraction. And the mucilage, actually, my PhD student was able to start developing biodegradable, like edible films or alternative to plastics using that mucilage from the chia seeds. So that was another patent that we also were able to develop from that. Because, this is, again, finding alternatives to petroleum-based plastics. That's also one of the biggest concerns, right? Like we have to leave the fossil fuels away.
And then how it works, the part of identifying the bioactive peptides, and how do you locate those?
Yes. So, for example, what we do is we use chromatography techniques. So we start separating so first we have, for example, I'll walk you in the concept of, let's say, the canary seeds, where we've done actually everything from in vitro lab scale, in silico with computer modeling, all the way to an in vivo model using mice. And what we did is we have our canary seeds. We know in Mexico they are widely used for people that want to lose weight. That's sort of the fame they have, but there was no studies on it. And I'm talking about this maybe about 10 years ago. So we started looking at, okay, why is this the reason of canary seeds having anti-obesity effects? So we started doing the canary seeds, extracting the oil. You don't want the fat to interfere with the protein. Then we have oil. Then we had the leftover meal, or canary seed meal so that's with no oil. We add a commercial enzyme, break that protein into peptides. Then those peptides, we filter them by molecular weight, because we know from literature and all the research, anyone that works with peptides knows that they have to be below 3 kilodaltons in order to have a biological effect, a health benefit. So they have to be small enough so that they could actually, when you digest them, they could be even broken down even further. And anything below 3 kilodaltons, or between 2 and 20 amino acids in length, is most likely to be able to be absorbed through your intestinal cell wall and then pass into your bloodstream and have that health benefit, right? Because if the peptide is too big, it's not going to be fully absorbed, right? And it's not going to go into your bloodstream and exert the benefit. So we broke them down by molecular weight, anything below 3 kilodaltons. Then we actually started fractioning based on their hydrophobicity. Because, again, literature, we know that hydrophobic peptides tend to have more potent health benefits. So we separate that 3 kilodalton fraction into hydrophobicity stages, and then the more hydrophobic peptides, we test all the fractions, but the ones that have the most, which were the hydrophobic, the most bioactivity, then we can actually separate them further if we wanted to by their charge. So cationic versus anionic peptides. Cationic peptides are more potent. And then we test again, okay, do they still have this bioactivity for inhibiting, for example, the enzymes related with lipids metabolism. So we were testing them directly towards pancreatic lipase, human pancreatic lipase. So they would inhibit that enzyme. So if you inhibit that enzyme, then your body ideally, right, will not be able to that, and then you don't absorb them, then you don't get the caloric intake from the fats. That's the sort of the nutshell of it. One thing I forgot to say, we also did a simulated gastrointestinal digestion. So we exposed those 3 kilodalton peptides first through a simulated gastrointestinal digestion to mimic what would happen in the human body if we were to
like a
eat
TIM
them
model
and digest them. Yes, like a TIM model or InfoGest, which is very popular right now. Anyway, so once we had that, then we got those fractions after we had to separate them by size, by hydrophobicity, and then by charge as well. We could then send them out for sequencing with a colleague in Indiana University and in the School of Medicine, and she sequenced those fractions for us that were the most potent. Those fractions then that we have those sequences, we analyze them in silico or bioinformatics to do molecular docking, molecular dynamic simulation to try and establish how are those peptide sequences interacting with the active site of the lipase in order to cause that inhibition. So it gave us some insights on how this interaction was happening, what type of bonding was happening, was it hydrogen, van der Waals, etc., etc. Was it on the active side or next to the active site and things like that. So then we knew, okay, yes, it's working. Let's try now with an animal model. And that's when we did our animal study with mice, with healthy mice. We had a population of 40 mice divided into groups of 5 groups of 8. And then, so one group had the normal diet that they're fed, a balanced caloric diet with protein, carbohydrates, fats, etc. Then we had the induced obesity groups, which were the groups that we gave them the Western diet. So what's the Western diet? Very high in calories, particularly coming from fat and carbohydrates.
You gave them fast food.
Yes, we gave them French fries and all this other fast food. I'm not going to name any brands so I don't get into trouble here. But yeah, so it was really sad, right? To see them gaining weight after a few weeks of being on that diet. And then what we started doing is we had so we have the normal diet as a control group. Then we had the other 4 groups that were giving the Western or induced into obesity. For those 4 other groups, 2 of them received a different concentration of those peptides from the canary seeds that we knew had activity to inhibit lipase. So we gave them, one group was, I think, 250 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and we gave those peptides daily for 1 week through oral gavage. So we force fed the mice, each mice, with that amount of peptide. The reason we do that is we wanted to make sure they were eating that. Other studies, they added into their diet, and then you just hope that they will eat it. But we wanted to make sure that they were eating that 250 milligrams per kilogram of body weight per day to see if it would have any effect. So in addition, they had food and water at leisure. They could eat as much as they wanted. All of them, all 5 groups. And then another group had just the Western diet, no treatment. So that's your negative control. So they ballooned, they were obese, no control whatsoever, eating happily and drinking happily as much as they wanted. And then the last group was what we call also a positive control. So in that group, we force-fed them Olestra. I don't know if you've heard of it, right? That's a lipase inhibitor that you can buy in pharmacies over the counter if you want to lose weight. So it's a well-known lipase inhibitor.
I only heard about, of these diet ones, I only heard about Ozempic so far, I would say. I haven't heard about any
look it up. Yes, it's, they sell it. I can't remember what the market name for it, but the pharmaceutical name is Orlistat.
Orlistat,
and, Orlistat, with an O. Anyway, so after a few, we have I think it was 7 weeks after this, the animals we were obviously every day measuring blood glucose levels, like getting every week getting blood samples, weighing them every day, counting the amount of feces, collecting the feces, weighing the amount of feces because and how much food they were eating. So you will count that every day. And anyways, at the end of the study, I think it was total, I can't remember if it was 10 weeks. The animals obviously had to be sacrificed, and then we collect the organs to see what was the damage, or maybe non-existent in the organs based on this extreme diet. So to make these results short, the animals that had the normal diet obviously didn't maintain a normal weight. The animals that were given the orlistat and the peptides also gained a little bit of weight, but not significantly higher than the normal diet. It was pretty good, but compared to the Western diet, so the obese group, they were, a lot healthier. They did not gain that much weight. The ones that were eating force-fed the orlistat were eating a lot of food, a lot more than the other groups. So that means that they were not being induced satiety. So something was happening, that they were always hungry. Whereas the ones in the normal diet, like I said, they ate normally what they would eat. The ones with the peptides were eating even less than the ones in the normal diet. So we realized that there was some satiety being induced in those two groups based on the peptides that we were force feeding them. And that was corroborated when we analyzed their blood for the hormones that are associated with satiety. So, for example, the ghrelin and leptin are two hormones that our brain will trigger to tell us that, okay, it's time to eat or it's time to stop eating.
Yeah.
We're full. So those levels were expressed higher in the groups that had the peptides force-fed to them. When we looked at the liver on the animals, so the ones in the normal diet, their liver looked normal, right? Like it's supposed to look. The ones that were obese had the fatty liver, so all this damage by the fatty fat deposits. And the ones in the orlistat and peptide diets had not damage like the Western diet, not exactly the same as the normal, somewhere in between, but the ones with the peptides were especially the 250 milligrams were very close to what the normal livers look like. So we knew that, yes, it's working, right? Because it's not inducing all those damages. So that sort of, in a nutshell, that's how we went from, an idea of what I don't like to use this term because I think it's kind of sexist, but the wives' tale, old wives' tale, that canary seeds can help prevent obesity or they're used for weight control. Well, we actually went and studied it from in vitro, in silico. We also did cell studies and then animal
model. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are two things I wanted to ask, maybe three, but let's start with two. The first one is out of curiosity, because I'm a biochemist. You mentioned that hydrophobicity is something that can indicate you, like whether like peptides can have more or less functionality or effect. It's a matter of the amino acids that are in there, like certain amino acids that are more hydrophobic tend to be also the ones that tend to also have that effect.
Yes. So there's along with being if it's considered a hydrophobic, it's especially if it's hydrophobic, for example, a hydrophobic amino acid present in the C terminal.
Yeah,
that's sort of what's been reported as being a trait for this bioactive peptides.
And the second one, once you do this study, what is the application that you go to see for it? Is for other kind of drugs, or shall it go in a more supplemented way, or how do you see it?
Yes, I think so for example, in the case of the canary seeds, it's definitely as a potential not pharmaceutical, because this qualifies under the foods for health group. So what we're trying to do is it's promote other alternatives for people that are concerned maybe with their weight but don't want to go the route of the pharmaceuticals, like injections or taking pharmaceutical drugs that may have undesirable side effects. Whereas with a natural route, saying, hey, if you're drinking glasses of canary seed milk, that it's or canary, you have the canary seed protein powder and you mix it up in your favorite milk every morning or as a smoothie or something and drink it. These are some of the health effects you may have, because that protein, once you break it down and digest it, it's most likely going to induce satiety, inhibit the lipase to some extent, etc., etc. So alternatives to health benefits, so that you don't have to, in case you're not ready to be into the pharmaceutical group.
But it's true
or
that
you're
in
not
the end,
that drastically ill or
I
anything.
am just thinking that in your research you have looked already really through the biopeptide, but you do the same study but with the canary seed whole, because in the end when the microstructure changes, sometimes can also affect like the bioavailability of the biopeptide, or whether I don't know if the enzymes that were used in particular are some also enzymes that
Hmm.
can be found in the body that can create like that similar biopeptide as well.
Yes, so that's why I think for us it was important to do that simulated gastrointestinal
Yeah,
digestion as
okay,
well,
of course.
because then we knew that using the enzymes that are and the conditions that mimic what our body would undergo through will deliver some of these peptides.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And eventually, the best research model that you used was close to human consumption, and basically is the animal model, right, where it showed health benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I think still quite preliminary, right? Because even mice, it's not that they're that close to, the
No.
best to mimic humans, it's using actually pigs. But obviously that's extremely expensive and very difficult to get funding for, for that. But with all this preliminary data, I think it facilitates having this type of studies in the future with higher models of animals like pigs, or even trying a small clinical trial, because the canary seeds are sold as supplements already, like as powder. Even through Amazon, you can buy them, and I think in Spain they sell them as canary seed milk. You can actually as a beverage.
Ever had
Um,
it?
The thing is, I don't know what is the translation of canary seed to Spanish.
alpiste, alpiste.
Maybe, yeah, okay.
Yes,
Maybe it's true. I haven't
I've
tried
seen
for sure. I
I've seen
don't
the
like milk, so
advertisement milk.
yeah, no. But I mean, I only drink milk with I will not say brand cocoa powder.
Okay. Well, there you go. Just add chocolate powder to it. But for
Well,
example, before I forget, with the regards, why this was with regards with canary seeds, but for example, going back quickly just to insects, in insects, I wasn't that interested in finding, oh, they're going to prevent weight gain, or, what we were trying to enlighten about that is that they are an alternative protein to feed, very good protein source, more sustainable, and in addition to be highly nutritious, they also have health benefits, that they could lower hypertension, prevent type 2 diabetes. But the sort of to push the consumption and the acceptance of insects as food.
okay, let's now then dive into
Yes.
insects, because you
Yes.
brought the topic. We actually were putting like, yeah, let's bring the topic, because I also wanted to mention it with the chia seeds and the canary seeds in some way. That is how happened. I mean, the thing about insects in some way, or the first part that we would like to address, is the fact that they're quite strange for us as like novel thing to put in our diets, but actually they belong to other diets around the world, like for thousands of years. We couldn't even talk. Have you ever looked into what is the reason why this does not happen in the Western societies, and how, for example, maybe things like colonization in America affected to the disappearance of these foods from their diets?
Yeah, good point there. So I personally haven't looked into it, but I have read quite about a lot about it. There is a lot of amazing anthropologists out there that have published that work precisely in the area of entomology. Um, and what from what I've read is that what happened is during the last ice age, which was maybe 10,000, 12,000 years ago, um, right, the north portion, if you take the Tropic of Cancer, anything above that was frozen, covered in ice, and anything below the Tropic of Cancer was thawed. No, it was not covered in ice. So if you think of our human ancestors and migration patterns, those that lived in ice-covered areas, which now is Europe and U.S., Canada, parts of Russia as well, those they relied on hunting to survive, because there were no plants, no insects really, if everything's covered in ice. Whereas below Tropic of Cancer, you had warmer temperatures, you had more biodiversity in your environment, you had a lot of plants, insects, and if you notice, that's where all most of the eating or entomophagy practicing countries are located nowadays.
Okay.
And I think that's what anthropologists have hypothesized, that that's the reason why to this day there's that drastic difference. That's where it started, and then through evolution and through time, then we have that Europeans tended to see that as a sign of disgust or pests that are eating our crops. So we start associating it with a negative connotation. They're eating our crops. They're not. We should not. Let's kill them. And when colonization happened in many countries, then those thoughts were brought with them, and in a lot of, I know with in Mexico in particular, that imposing the new ways of, this is what you have, this is the religion you have to follow, this is the food you have to eat, etc., etc., and some of these practices got lost. But hey, you can still go to Mexico, and there's about 300 species you can eat. We
I
still
mean,
eat them.
you showed us, no, on a picture.
Yes.
I think different
Yeah.
insects that you ate on the market.
Yes, in Mexico City.
Yeah.
Definitely, you can still eat
Yeah.
them. And in restaurants too. Many restaurants offer them.
But are they now a delicacy, or is it still like a low value product?
No, I think right now, it's more of a delicacy, especially because a lot of those insects are still wild caught, like harvested in the wild. You can't really farm them. So they are expensive and difficult to. They're like season in different. So during the rainy season, so the month of May, June, July, it's usually the best season for eating insects in Mexico.
Yeah, there is a curious thing. Okay, so Western world does not eat insects. That happens, no?
Mhm.
However, now we see that there's a turn, and there is growing a little bit the interest, and even the economists talk even like how the market that the insects can have. I think somewhere in, don't know if it was one of your papers or I read it somewhere else, that we were talking about a market of, I don't know how many billions of dollars or trillions. I don't remember like the exact cipher. The thing is, we were talking about a really high number. What are the factors that have affected to now like this interest to consume insects?
Mm-hmm. I think it all started. What triggered this was that announcement from the United Nations. I believe it was in the 2013, around that time, that the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations came up with this bulletin informing, letting all the countries know that to what's happening in the next 25, 30 years with regards to the availability of protein to feed the growing world's population, and that we would not have enough. The way our agriculture's practices are taking place right now, we would need to increase that amount of protein or food that we make right now by at least 50% in order to have enough food to feed the world by the year 2050. So if you notice, right now we are already struggling with enough land, drought, accessibility to food because of we keep growing and expanding and not having enough resources to grow the food, exactly, and war and all this other disputes. So moving forward, we need to look at. I think that was what the United Nations was trying to emphasize, that we need to look for more sustainable protein sources that will not require as much inputs, but will produce high outputs in terms of food. So insects is one of the main ones because of their high protein content, but they require so much less or fewer resources than conventional proteins that we're used to, like poultry and pigs and obviously beef, cattle.
I mean, it sounds like a perfect solution for a lot of things, and definitely around these challenges that you just mentioned. Then I'm questioning, like, where does then the problem lays, right? Is it the adoption of consumers basically, or is it even in the production of insects? Currently I also read a lot about like electricity use in those giant farms that is quite high.
They should
What
put
do you
solar
think?
panels. But yes, that's probably an issue. I think the problem is it's a multifaceted problem. I don't think it's just one thing that's causing this. It's number one, obviously, The main one is the adoption, like, because we still have, even in countries where insects are normally consumed, you still have a neophobic or food neophobic population that are afraid of insects because they associate them with pests, because they associate them with insect bites, or like fleas and ticks, and we all group them spiders, even though spiders are not insects. Everyone thinks spiders are insects, and they're not. And we think of them as bugs. And spiders bite. They can be poisonous. Scorpions and all of that. So
Yeah.
bees, honey, and so there's that negative aberration towards, or taboo towards, insects in general. And then if you have them in food, like, because for me as a scientist, as a food scientist, the challenge is, how can we make insects palatable and maybe in a non-recognizable form so that people will eat them? Because what research has shown, and that is published by many scientists, is that people that are afraid of eating insects are more open to trying them and incorporating them into their diet if they don't recognize them, if they don't see them, right? It's like we were saying, like if you go into the supermarket or grocery store and you see the whole carcass of the chicken hanging there and you just buy it, well, you're not going to eat it like that, right? You cook it, you prepare it, well, it's the same with the insects, right?
Yeah, no. I know that in markets when we go out of the Netherlands and Spain, for instance, or even like in Greece, or I think even if you go worldwide, you have markets where you see the full, full animal laying.
Yes.
And then my girlfriend is always like, walk. I say, what? You're eating this normally, but you just buy it in the supermarket already cut.
Like the first time that in a market in Spain I saw a rabbit just hanging. Like, it was just like all them. Yeah, it was a dead rabbit without the skin or anything. It was and like that moment of shock. But I think that I mean, it's indeed is important that you did the research, and I would like to ask you, like, how did you conduct this research to know like how what consumers preferred? But I think that the point that you were saying that we mentioned already is important. I think that one of the main reasons why people does not have problem eating meat, for example, is because they don't see where it comes from. There's always like this thing of showing the people, look, this is the farm of how they're killing the cow, and then for a lot of people that is like, oh, but that is horrible. It's like, yeah, well, how do you think would happen? Like the cow would go happily and
read a book before,
And the thing is that when people see a burger or a sausage or they see the leg of the chicken, they're not thinking on the whole process of and the same happens with an insect. If you show them like the whole insect, then they will be thinking about the animal. If you show it in any other format, they do not have to think about it.
But where the insect story is for me always like a comparison as what it was with lobster. Like in the past, the lobster was also not a widely eaten animal because it was associated as a dirty animal that walks on the sea. And basically everyone was like, well, that's like it's in the dirt, it has everything, so it was mainly given to the poor. But you see now it's up to the ladder, and that is, I always keep that in mind. Like for certain things in food, I believe it can have a similar path eventually, right? And might be the case also for insects in the end.
Yes, insects are the lobster of the land, or lobsters are the crickets of the sea.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, but then how did you did like this research to see like the consumer acceptance around how do you present the food?
So we did one study, but obviously there's a lot of very good publications and studies out there that have shown that, again, that overall that they don't want to see them, they don't want to recognize them, and if they're covered in chocolate or made into an actual product, then that's more appealing and more likely they will eat them. The study we did, we actually sent out a survey through social media, this was back in, I would say about 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. We actually received almost 4,000 respondents, and where we would show them pictures of different protein sources. So we would show them, for example, a steak, a nice steak, plate with a steak, juicy steak, and saying, "Will you eat this protein source? Yes, no." So they would click well. People that are meat eaters, most of the respondents said yes. Then we would show them one with a nice, with chicken, a nice dish that had chicken. Another one had salmon. Other had like shellfish. So each picture, each question had a different picture of a different protein source, and it would ask them, "Will you consider eating this protein source?" Then we even went into plant-based protein sources, so like tofu, another like legumes, all these beans and everything. Will you eat this? So then, people that, yeah, I would. That looks appetizing. So the last question was a picture of a plate with different insects in it. You could see there were insects, not disguised in any way, but in a plate, and say, "Will you eat this protein source?" And as you would expect, about 70% of those 4,000 respondents said no. And then when we say, "Why not?" So the next question triggered, "Why will you not eat them?" Then the responses were, "Insects are filthy. Humans should not be eating insects. I think the texture is going to be horrible. I'm afraid of insects," etc., etc. So then the next question they had was a hamburger, and it looked just like a regular hamburger with cheese and pickles and, really nice in the bread and in the plate. And we said, "If we told you that this hamburger was made with insect protein, will you eat it or will you try it?" And then you remember that 70% that had said no, out of those 67% said, okay, so more than half of them said, yes, we would try it. And then we asked them why, and then they said, because, I don't see them, because then it's a texture I'm familiar with, it's a food I'm familiar with, etc., etc. So that's what led me to say, okay, then we really have to focus on promoting eating insects, not as the actual visual bugs, but making foods that people are more comfortable trying, and then just fortifying them or supplementing that food with the insect protein.
Yeah.
There is one reflection that I also do this, that I don't know if you maybe share it as well, Andrea, that is actually a problem that I see with certain insect brands or insect food brands, that they do it a lot about the insect. And I understand it as a unique selling point, and you're telling them, the people, that the source of this protein is going to be different, and that is good. But then sometimes I think that can also play in the countryside, like the fact that you are making it that is about a cricket, maybe is what people says, like, oof. Then I don't know, normally the packaging, they have like a happy cricket or something like that, okay, cricket burgers, and the thing is that then you're putting like the idea of the cricket in the minds of the people. I understand that marketing something like that must not be completely easy without mentioning that and being transparent. But at the same time, it's like maybe they should just less of a fuss about it. Maybe focus more on the nutritional and the health benefits that you also have studied of them, and mention, like, not trying to hide it, like it has cricket, but maybe you don't need to make your logo about a cricket. Maybe you can just go through other part and don't focus so much in that, because then maybe you're not helping the people to erase from their minds the picture of the insect.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point, and I think that's definitely a challenge or something that companies need to focus on, and maybe stop emphasizing, like you said, having a cricket on the logo or the name of the product that resembles something related to insects or cricket, and just, like you said, focus on the actual protein or the product itself. And then in the back of the package, where you have your nutrition facts and you have your list of ingredients, you listed cricket protein or yellow mealworm.
Even in the front packaging, I think, because it's fair, I believe it's fair with the consumer to tell them that, it's a cricket burger, but maybe don't do it like if it was some sort of a gimmick, like big cricket or something like that, because okay, I understand it can be disruptive and it can work, and if that is your focus, then it's fine. But at the same time, I believe that can play you the other side.
Can you call this a burger? Like, can you say?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in my opinion, yes, because a burger is a format that you deliver
I know,
food.
but like, for instance, with the plant-based, was this whole thing, or like it
Yeah,
couldn't
but I
be
think
used said as
I
a
really
burger.
disagree with that.
Yeah, no.
So I don't know in Europe what's the regulation for that. Are you allowed to say plant-based meat, plant-based chicken, or how do you
There was in
refer
France
to
there
those?
was a ban, but it was removed
Yeah.
recently because they could not call plant-based sausage. I always say that for me the problem is to call something plant-based chicken or plant-based pork, because something that is plant-based it cannot be pork. It's just
Yeah.
like it's something that goes in me. It's like, no, it cannot be a plant-based pork. It can be plant-based something else.
Yeah.
But when we talk about format,
So I'm telling you, can it be then called a burger, or does
my
it need to
opinion,
be an insect burger?
law-wise, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in my opinion, yes, because burger is a format in which you can do an aubergine burger, for
Yeah.
example. No, it's not it's a format in which you deliver the food,
Yeah.
not an animal per se.
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of companies are also sorting into saying like, I know we've seen like plant-based cheese alternative, plant-based
exactly.
chicken alternative.
Alternative.
I think that
Yeah.
alternative word in it, say, or analog, right? But that it's mimicking, but not. Yeah.
When it comes to insects, there is also this concern about food safety. But then we talk about, I think, the whole insect, right? Like people might think about any additional things that can get into the body, which are questionable, because the insect also eats all kind of things. You dived into this, or I believe you have looked into this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think so. There's two things, right? If you're eating insects that are wild caught, so harvested from forests or what have you, then you, like you said, we have no control of what those insects are being exposed to or eating. So they could be eating a whole bunch of pesticide residues in that are present naturally, like unfortunately through our actions are present in the environment. So that's a risk. But or they're exposed to pathogenic bacteria and or other microorganisms that can make us sick. Whereas the ones that are being biomass produced, so the insect farm ones, they have controlled conditions for the diet they receive and obviously the environment in which they're growing them. So those are more prone to be absent, have the absence of pathogens and contaminants that you will find in the wild harvested ones.
What about allergenicity? Is something that it can be is a potential danger also, no, of insects.
Yes, so that's that. Sorry, yes, that's one of the main, I guess, main concerns. Rather being like when say, oh, insects, are they safe? Like microbial wise, I'm like, yeah, I think microbial wise, I'm not so concerned as to with the allergens. Yes, so people that are allergic to shellfish, like lobster, shrimp, crab, etc., are most likely going to be also allergic to insects, and that's because both shellfish and insects, the insecta, are arthropods, and that allows them to cross-react the tropomyosin present in shellfish. That muscle protein is also cross-reacts with tropomyosin in insects. It even has the same molecular weight, 37 kilodaltons. So we have, my lab, my grad student, Felicia, she did her PhD thesis was, among other things, she did a lot of work in trying to isolate the tropomyosin in insects and look at ways on how can we process, when we process the insect protein to make those insect powders, what effect does that have on that tropomyosin, to make sure that it was perhaps triggering the epitope regions on tropomyosin to diminish that allergic response in humans when we tried it with human sera. So yes, so that's a big thing, and that's why any product that has insect protein in it, in the label, in the back, they have to have the warning sign that if you are allergic to shellfish, you should not eat that product because of a potential for an allergic reaction.
What is the status of the insect market in North America, United States? Is like there are many brands, or is it still not growing?
Yeah, no, we're still a little. I think definitely Europe. I think it's way more ahead. in that aspect.
But it's more for pet food, I believe. In here, it's more feed and stuff like
For
that.
feed.
Well, lately we got some bad news on
Yeah,
the biggest
insects.
one here, right? So
Yes, the mealworm farm, right?
yeah.
That you said was having some issues. That was really unfortunate. I know that here, and I haven't followed up with them in a couple of years, but there was a cricket farm from Texas that opened a huge facility in Canada, in Ontario, 100,000 square feet, fully automated cricket farm, both for animal and human food production, right? So, and there is another, I said there was another farm that opened also in Decatur, Illinois, and also that's for a big protein company. So I think it's starting to pick up, even if it's for animal feed. I think that also it's going to have a good impact on the environment, because a lot of the issues we have with having to grow all this food towards the year 2050 is because we don't have enough space to grow food for us, but also to grow the feed for the animals that we want to eat.
Yeah.
So if we find alternative protein sources to develop feed for these animals and these alternative protein sources are more sustainable, such as the case of insects, then let's that's great, because it's definitely going to have relieve some of that agriculture pressure and allow us to focus in on the other issues.
Well, I have one thing that it's not related to insects directly, but actually more on your research. You did so many different researches so far. I wanted to know what is one of the biggest failures and lessons that you got out of that during the time.
Well, where can I start? No, you have time. No, I'm kidding. I think no. One of the major for me, especially recently, one of the biggest gridlocks I have found is with regards to the research related to insects. When I started this, focusing on insect protein and researching insects as a protein source, that was about almost 10 years ago. The pushback from my peers, from funding agencies, right, to fund the research, regulations, so federal government regulations that didn't think that insects should be eaten because extreme neophobics are making the rules. So I think that's one of that was sort of a challenge, and it's been a challenge because immediately when you submit a research proposal, right, with this great idea of how to farm insects and use them for food and feed, and this is how we're going to process them, and this is the foods we're going to try and formulate with them, and then you get the reviews back and saying, oh, insects should not be eaten. Insects are just, and I'm like, that's not going to help. If you're bringing your personal beliefs and your personal dislikes into an objective peer review evaluation, which you're obviously not doing. It's being very subjective. So that, to me, that was very upsetting and disappointing. But I've been blessed that I have other ways of getting funding from here and there that have allowed me to pursue my research interests and not allowed to be dictated by what the fashion or the popular themes and topics are, and everyone's doing that. I've always said, no, well, everyone's doing that. I want to do something different. This is what I'm passionate about, and I don't want to be forced into doing research that I'm not interested in.
I believe that there is one thing that I have always been curious, and I guess is admirable, of scientists. There is the fact of how do you keep your bias of getting results out of the reality that the scientific rigor that your work requires. Like I guess that a lot of times you would just see to the results, see that it's not what you want, and say like, I need to change this of the method, or it's just because in the end that is your work, and it depends a little bit on that.
Well, I think right for us, for scientists, is if something doesn't work, we try and find out why it doesn't work, why it didn't work, and sometimes something not working may lead to actually a solution for something else. or preventing, right? Even if something doesn't work, by you saying and in your publication saying we did not see a positive effect or a positive correlation, or there was no significant difference in this and this and that, I think it also allows then other researchers to say, okay, then I should not try this way because they already did it and it didn't work, or I should maybe modify this. And like, it's communication amongst ourselves to help each other advance in the same goal, right? Advance the science.
But it must be really. I know that is really stressful because no results are results, and I really believe in that, and that is true. But no results, let's get funding, than results.
Yes, and that's why also,
I understand sometimes, like, and I know cases where in the end mispractices happens because people need results. But in the end, you just realize that is a big pressure. The fact of you don't have the chance of being wrong.
No.
Yes. Well, you have to remember that with science, right? Our results are evidence; they're not opinions. So you are bringing evidence, regardless of what that evidence is. It's not an opinion, because you have gone through the scientific method to ensure that whatever results you've gathered are scientifically sound and proven.
Yeah.
To provide that evidence, and not instead of just an opinion of this is what might be happening.
Evidence that still can be challenged, right? So
yes, yeah.
I will say, like, as a researcher, you think if you think about a researcher, you get to understand that the arguments that you put out is always like hypothesis, because you are waiting that they are getting countered by somebody else. And if you think like that, also duringly you be critical and you listen to others, you be open more. I think you have a higher curiosity in that sense. Good. I think that we have a lot of time already spent here, and
I would like just to do one question more.
Oh, go ahead.
Like, what advice would you give to aspiring researchers, people that is just entering in the food research? Maybe they're studying their PhDs. Maybe they're just studying in their bachelors. What is the advice that you give about that for your that you believe that is important to tell them?
I think is to be passionate about what you're doing. So as a PhD student, or once you start in a research company or in academia, make sure that you always follow your passion for what you want to do. Like, again, don't let others dictate what you should be researching. Sometimes in a PhD that's more difficult because you're working under someone, right? It's your supervisor, your principal investigator is sort of telling you, this is the funding I have, it's for this project, and you're in it or not. But try to find some passion in that, so that it also motivates you, because it's really hard, I know, to in a PhD to dedicate all these years of your life to a project, and if you're not happy or passionate about it, you're going to be so miserable, and you're going to start disrespecting it, disliking it, and perhaps not pursuing it further on. It would leave you a little bit bitter. So be happy, be happy with what you do, and if that project or that research path is not making you excited about coming every day to the lab to discover something or to do your experiments, then you have to step back and think, okay, why is this not making me happy, and what can I do to be happy about running these experiments? What am I trying to find out? So for me, it's always been curiosity. I've always been curious about how can we extract the protein from the insect. Why is canary seed preventing weight gain? Chia seeds have been consumed by the Aztec. Why are they so good for us? Like things that I want to find out about. It's what I would come to the lab and tell the students, hey, I brought some chia seeds or canary seeds. I found them. Let's start breaking them up and see what we can find out. It's things that I'm happy about.
I have to say, like, when I did my bachelor's, there was a moment that I was like, I am not done for the lab work. I'm just not like that kind of person. But like hearing you talking about science, it's just like remembering all the things that I actually liked about being around science, and I think that is really beautiful how you transmit it.
Thank you, but talk to me in a few months and we'll see how I'm feeling.
Well, we keep definitely in touch, so we will ask it. I think now it's like a closing part, and we always do two things. Two last questions. You get the opportunity to ask us a question. I've actually fired you with a lot of questions now. So
Okay. Oh, I wish I had known. I would have really thought of some. So I guess for you would be, my question to you would be, um, based on your age group, your generation, what will you like to see in the future, or that hasn't been done, or that you think it was
that's
a mistake done by people like in my generation or even older? I'm not a boomer.
I'm not a boomer.
I'm ex.
Yeah, I'm gonna make
But
mistakes here if I'm gonna say like
That's a
the
difficult
introduction
question.
of the car. No.
exactly. So if you had to go back in time or something, what will
Shoot.
you try and change or try to alert us of?
I'm gonna say that, but it has to. We have to go far in generations. But I believe that regarding food, I would like that we get back to markets instead of supermarkets. That is one thing that I would like to see. That I don't know if my generation. I hope my generation, but in the future we get more in back to the markets where there are places where you not only interact with the food but also interact with the people that grow the food, the people that are selling you the food, people that can tell you this meat, this fruit, this vegetable is in season or is whatever.
Yeah.
My father still goes to the market in my hometown, and many people does it. But my generation tends more to go to the supermarket because that's what we have grown with, and I would like it the other way around.
Yeah, to know where your food comes from.
Exactly.
To know the person that made that food for you or created that food for you.
Yeah, I think it really, when you do those sort of things, those kind of things, you learn to value even more the food. And I think that is something that is missing. Like our generation cooks less. Our generation cares less about what they eat, and it's a matter also because every time we're more disconnected from the food. Every time we see less from where it comes from. There is this thing of kids in New York that they think that actually peppers come from the supermarket. That they not that they do grow. I mean, they are kids, of course. I mean, we cannot like really blame them. I probably when I was little, I also did not have a lot of reflection, and maybe that kid would have been me. But that's a reality. We have like less knowledge about what growing food means, and when we have less knowledge and less vision of it, we give it less value, and we just think it cares less.
Is a good one. I like the question, but I also have the feeling with this question we're gonna blame a generation that didn't know anything about the problems.
No, I don't blame the generation.
So no. But like it is not like like they implemented. They were at that time thinking about whoa, we have to get into this idea because they couldn't see the full perspective. But I think, and I don't know, it's not generation related. Well, it's not. Yeah, maybe
past.
I mean, one of the things I'm struggling with within the food and egg is struggling, sometimes questioning a lot. Is like if it is really good to have food and in the capitalism system, as because in the end we can question if food becomes a commodity. Is that really what we want to see? Because we lose its value basically, and we see nowadays like it ended up with quite a lot of problems. That's why we have to go back to regenerative. I just I don't know what kind of generations came with this, but
well, it was many years ago. Capitalism
like
is not from the
a year ago. I don't know
No.
exactly.
No. But yeah, no. But it's a problem. I mean, as I said, I think that I said this before in conversation with people. I think every economic system has its time. Feudalism has time. Capitalism probably made sense in another age, and
Exactly.
maybe it's just now that there's a moment where another system shall be in place because it does not fit anymore.
Yeah, or how can we modify it to go
Exactly.
back to? I think after I guess after the Second World War, our food security changed quite a bit, right? So during the war, there was so much scarcity of everything, right? throughout the entire world, not just in the countries where the war was taking place. So I think that made us also, after the war, the generations after the war as well, then we stopped like you say, appreciating maybe a lot of the food, because it was now after the war where everything became so much more widely available because of
Yeah,
the
abundance.
industrialization, right? Mass production.
Exactly, globalization.
Yeah,
Globalization.
I think that is one of the.
Yeah, so I think that's probably something that we need to go back and appreciate again, food, and respect it for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just, but yeah, it's not like black and white and stuff, but that you on one hand have such an enormous amount of food waste, and on the other hand, you still have people in hunger. But it's not like
Starving.
that you can, like say, no, we can equally divide it nowadays. Blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of challenges within the system, of course, to achieve that.
Once I read that a lot of that had to do also, even if we have enough, like we have enough food to feed the entire world, the reason why so many people in so many countries are still under extreme malnourished, starving, it's not because, well, obviously food availability, but it's all this political gridlocks and, right, the wars, political issues, trying to control populations in these countries by limiting their access to food.
I mean,
So
we had a
there's-
talk with Fao in the penitentiary, he said it, food is a weapon, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
exactly.
used in that sense.
You can see it in Middle East
So,
now. So
yeah.
Yeah, and that's so upsetting. Remember that question you made to me at the beginning of how did I see the future? Well, we should all have, that's our right. It's a given right. We should have access to food, education, health, shelter, and our governments need to make sure they provide that. I mean, that's why they're governing.
Totally agree. Okay, to finish the podcast with a delicious last note, the last question.
The very last question
is
yes.
What is your favorite food or dish, Andrea?
Oh, yes. Okay, I thought about that one better now because I didn't want to make it too broad, like I like Italian food. No, but there is so I have my picks. Mexican food. Within Mexican food, my favorite food is tacos al pastor. Every time I go
really
to Mexico,
delicious. Yeah.
Oh, you know it.
Every
Okay,
time I go to Mexico City, tacos al, and they have to be from Mexico City.
Yeah, the thing is, I haven't tried the real ones. I hope that next year I can. If I want to end up going to Mexico, I really hope. But tacos al pastor are delicious. Yeah.
Just send me an email or a WhatsApp or something so that I'll tell you which are the best tacos al pastor in Mexico City, because there's also levels. So that's probably it. And then in Italian food, I would say my best one would be the pasta cacio pepe.
Cacio pepe,
spaghetti
yeah.
cacio pepe. It's my favorite.
Which one is this one?
It's very easy. It's like
just very pepper and cheese
and
pecorino,
cheese. Exactly, pecorino.
Yeah, that's simple, but delicious.
It's very simple, but very delicious. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the whole conversation. I think it's been great. We don't get to have conversations really often with researchers. We appreciate all the conversations that we have in the podcast, but I think your view really gives us the chance to have other kind of insights that are really valuable to think about what we eat also in a different way. And I don't know. As I said, I come from a science background. I really like talking about science, and I think it was really nice. Just as the conversation that we had in Future of Protein Production in Amsterdam. So thanks a lot, Andrea, for coming. And we wish you the best.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and hope we get a chance to talk again in the future.
Yes.
Stay in touch.